Hello and welcome to Unify's webinar on securing applications in NXJ. This is your host, Matt Brunquell. Welcome. And what I'd like to do is just a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, I just want to let you know that this is an interactive presentation, and the way you can ask questions is using your WebEx toolbar. There's one of the buttons is a question mark. That's the Q&A button. Please use that. And Kevin and I will refer to that panel during the Q&A session to answer all your questions. There's also a chat button. That's the one with the little balloon or the little cloud. But it just makes it easier for us to look at one panel, the Q&A one, to make sure we cover all the questions. Also, for those of you that might be new to Unify Corporation, just to give you a background on the company hosting today's webinar, Unify is a publicly traded software company, and we've been in business for over 26 years. We're known for being the first to deliver a relational database in a Unix environment. But since then, we've delivered development software products that run across different databases besides our own and different platforms, really geared towards building and modernizing business applications and geared towards those business application developers, those that are trying to deliver applications for the end users where productivity is and rapid application development is key, and not getting bogged down in all of the low-level coding and infrastructure. And since then, we've also gone on to add to our portfolio all kinds of technologies and solutions for modernizing applications. This all grew out of our own business because we have lots of customers. We have literally thousands upon thousands of customers, and lots of them are actually using applications still that they built in versions of our product from 10, 12, 15 years ago. And so we've always been focused, even within our own products, of how can we modernize those or allow our customers to modernize those applications on the latest technology platforms and infrastructures coming out. And we've kind of spread outside of that into a few other application technologies that are on our own for modernizing as well. So just wanted to mention that. Next, what I want to do is just review our agenda. When I get to the NXJ Security piece, what I'll do is introduce our technical presenter today as well. But what we're going to do is give you, for those of you new to NXJ, just a one-slide overview of the NXJ solution, and then we'll actually go into the content of today's webinar, which is doing security in your NXJ applications and how easy it is to do, and then we'll do the Q&A session. And the thing I want you to keep in mind or kind of take away from today's webinar on the NXJ Security is that you're going to see how easy it is to build security into your applications with NXJ, but also how easy it is to consume or just take advantage of the security infrastructure that your organization already has in place, whether it be LDAP, a third-party security provider like LDAP or Active Directory, or if you just are going to use the traditional database role security, if you will, which actually is default in NXJ. Now with that, just a brief overview about NXJ. NXJ is a Java-based development tool, but it's all about building web-based applications, also known as rich internet applications or Web 2.0 applications. And what's different about NXJ over other solutions out there for doing web development is a couple things. One is its productivity out of the box to build applications is unparalleled. You can build applications very quickly and intuitively with this product without having to do or with doing very little low-level coding. And you only have to know basic Java syntax if you are going to add business logic coding in there. But out of the box, it builds forms that are automatically have insert, update, delete capability. And that's kind of the other thing that I think is very different about NXJ over other web development solutions out there is its integration with your database layer it's integrated and it's so automated that you do not have to do all the low-level kind of data handling, if you will, between your application and the database. that's being handled by the framework of NXJ automatically. And as a result of that, you see the productivity gains and just the rapid application development capability of NXJ shine. And you can see these images on the bottom of this slide. These are awards and recognition that NXJ has received for its productivity and just for its excellence as an application development solution. Now with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker, our technical speaker today on the security subject. And it's a great opportunity for, well, me to introduce, but for you guys to hear, more importantly, our presenter today is Kevin McCormick. Now, Kevin has been with Unify for over 15 years, and he's played various technical roles for the company over all of those years, both on the pre-sales and post-sales side. He's been a support manager, he's been in pre-sales, he's been a lead trainer, and in fact, he's still our lead trainer. And he's also kind of and he's been a consultant. He's been out there doing a lot of customer projects in various products, including NXJ, and kind of a senior technical account manager for us. He works on some of our top accounts that need a guiding hand on the technical side. And Kevin, what's nice about Kevin presenting today is he's been involved with the NXJ product since its introduction about 6 years ago. Is it 6 years now, Kevin?
Yep.
I think so. So, you know, we're getting someone with a lot of experience with this product, both from the back end on the technology side and R&D side here, as well as working out there on the customer requirements in their engagements with them on their NXJ development. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. And we actually all survived St. Patrick's Day with a name like McCormick. I'll have to bring that up. Not too much green beer involved yesterday. So let's see. So today we are talking about NXJ Security and how you integrate, well, security and how you integrate that into NXJ applications. So to do that, we're going to take a couple of different topics. We'll talk about how the security model works. In fact, we'll do a quick demo of how the security behaves. We'll talk about the setup of what happens in the development environment for your project as well as higher level settings, what coding is needed to use security, which isn't much at all, and then what happens at deployment time when you need to deploy your application to a remote application server. So before we get to the security model, I'm actually going to transition over to a browser and bring up a login screen. Now, we'll talk in a minute here. We didn't get to the login screen as our first point. We actually tried to go to a form that we weren't able to go to yet, so we were prompted to log in. What I'm going to do is we have 3 users. Dave is a customer role, Alice is in our sales and management role, and then Bob's in our shipping role. And all I want you to notice is that the login is Dave. He's our customer with limited access. There's a couple of things going on here, and we'll talk about this as we go through the other slides, but you'll notice the 3 buttons at the bottom. The Everyone button is unsecured, so it doesn't have any restrictions on. The other 2 buttons, Sales and Internal, you'll notice those are grayed or stippled out, so our customer can't get to those. And this happens automatically through the security hierarchy. Again, we'll see that in just a few minutes here. You'll notice that the go-to menu only has 1 option for it, for our customer. You can only get to the product form, and in fact, he can't do any updates or deletes because we've restricted those as well. Now, if we log out as our customer and go in as Bob from our shipping department, you'll notice that he now can get to the Internal button and the Everyone button, but not Sales, and he can also now get to the Invoice form to see what's going on there. And for those that have used our demo application that's applied to the NXJ, that's what this form is. I sort of added to that to make it available. Now, the last role I'm going to switch over to is Alice, who's a manager as well as in sales. And you'll notice she can get to all 3 of the buttons, including the sales buttons. And these buttons don't do much except give a little display message. But now she can also get to the employee information as well, since she's a manager. And she has full permissions on all the employees, update, delete, and so on. So I just wanted to do that to give you a feel for a little bit of security. I'm hoping that makes sense as we go through the infrastructure of how to set this up. Okay. So NXJ ties into external security providers, whether that is an LDAP server, like Directory Access Protocol, a Microsoft Active Directories, Lotus Domino, or if you're not using a security provider or choose not to, you can use a series of tables to authenticate users and assign them to groups. And that's the default for our demo database that comes with NXJ. Now within NXJ, as we'll see through some of the slides, inside your application you create your own custom roles for the application and then map those to the groups or specific users in the external authentication system, again, whether it's LDAP, Active Directory, or tables. And that's all done through the security manager here, which is what these pictures are showing. You'll see on the left picture, we have a series of roles that we've defined for accounting, customers, internal managers, and so on. Those are specific to this application, but in the dialog in the middle there, the property section, you'll see for the group, we set this group, the internal group, to accounting and sales. And on the right side, the chooser dialog, that's just showing the right side list is all of the groups that are in our security provider. And we've chosen two of them, accounting and sales, to match them, to be assigned to the internal role. Now, once you have the roles and the groups assigned and mapped together, you then choose what level of security you're going to do. And this is hierarchical, and we'll see this in the slide further down. But you have different levels. You have the application level, whether the application itself is secure, so if they try to go anywhere in the application. And then as well as at the form and the data view level, as well as the database operations. You saw that in the demo, the customer could look at the products but couldn't make any changes to them. So these are the database find, insert, update, delete operations. And then those of you that are familiar with NXJ, the buttons and links and menus all tie to commands, and those commands can also be secured and restricted based on what you want to allow people to do. And as we saw in the demo, the menus will automatically show what's available to the user based on their permissions. And buttons and link objects and double-click operations will all automatically take that behavior, whether it's permitted or not, for them to press that button or click the link or double-click on a field. So let's step back for just a second and explain what happened when I tried to log in. So what I did not go, if we look at the URL of where I tried to navigate to when I launched the application, I didn't start the login form. I tried to go to a form, that entry form that had the buttons and the menu on it, and that form was secured. And because I'd yet to log in, that means NXJ then goes to the login form first. It diverts the user. They go to the login form. If they're authenticated, then it goes on to the form they're trying to go to. Otherwise, they'll go to a form that's called the not authorized form, and that will allow them to either log out or do a previous form and go back. So as you can see, you can control what level permissions or what forms they gain access to and when to choose to authenticate them. There may be cases where you never challenge the user to log in because there's going to unrestricted parts of the application. So how do you set this up? There's a couple of things that happen in NXJ automatically when you install the NXJ developer. I want to go in more detail so that when you go deploy an application to a server, you know what's going on and what steps to take. So we'll first talk about the security tables that are required, those forms I just mentioned, the login form and the not authorized form, what project properties there are regarding security, what the development environment properties, so a higher level set of properties, and then how you actually do the security assignment. The NXJ runtime, well, the Java Enterprise Archive, when you run an NXJ application, knows to check and see if security is set in its properties, and if it does, it needs to look up in a series of tables for what the security settings are, what forms are secured, what permissions, what the role mappings are, and so on. We do this through a specifically named data source called NXJ DS, NXJ data source. So that has to be created in your application server. And by default, NXJ does this to the SQL-based database that we provide with NXJ. There's a database there in that server called repository that has this information. We'll see where we get that DDL for those tables in just a little bit. So again, those tables keep track of the security provider settings, again, LDAP, Active Directory, table-based, or the demo security tables. And within those series of tables, it keeps track for each project, each application, what roles are assigned, what that mapping from those roles to groups and users are, and what permissions you've set up for each of the different levels, application, form, data view, and command. So we've seen one of the two forms, the required forms that you have to have for NXJ to use security. You have to have a login form, and you have to have a not authorized form. And in fact, those two forms have to not have any restrictions placed on them in the security manager. You'll get an error. It's usually a common error when you first start working with security. You'll assign application level security. That gets inherited to the login form and the not authorized form, and you'll get a nice dialog saying that. First place to go is to go to the security manager and disable security for these two forms. Because remember, they don't navigate to these, the user doesn't get to these forms directly. They get diverted to these when they need to authenticate themselves. So in the project properties, custom pages tab is where you'll see those. You just have login form and not authorized form settings. Okay, so that's at the project level. The next part of the project level is just setting security to be enabled at all. On the front page of your project properties is an enable security checkbox. If you try and go to the security manager without having this checked, it'll tell you or ask you, do you want to enable security for the project, so it catches you. Now, a lot of end users have one NXJ application that launches another NXJ application. And if you're going to do this and want to pass the credentials for the logged in user onto that next application, you need to do two things. One is just a simple property of enable single sign-on, SSO, security for forms. And at the same time, you need to also deploy the NXJ security.ear that is provided in the NXJ release. And this allows the NXJ applications to verify and keep track of the authentication tokens between the NXJ applications. For those of you with the older versions of NXJ, before we removed the control center for other good reasons, that was already deployed. So this is a smaller subset of that. So the development environment. So all those couple of slides previous were regards to setting up for a specific application. When you're working in the development environment, there's actually higher level settings of what security is going to be used for all of the applications. So that's in the edit options dialog, and there's a security provider tab that's new to NXJ 12. And this lets you choose whether you're doing a demo connection, a custom LDAP, which actually we'll see in a second covers all of the Active Directory and Domino settings, and then JDBC for your database ones. So the demo choice really uses the database as well, just like JDBC, but it uses a predefined set of a user table, a group table, and an association table between those two. And that has some default users of Alice, Bob, Charlie, Dave, and some roles of customer, sales, shipping, management, and things like that. For the JDBC setting, what you have is a configuration XML file that describes what the tables and columns are, and there's a default one that's supplied with NXJ that describes the demo setup. So you can take that and modify it. What you need to, so if you already have a series of tables, you want to modify this XML document to point to the right table names, column names, and so on. And remember to use a user to group table as well so that NXJ knows what users belong to which groups. Now, if you're doing Active Directory or Lotus Domino or an LDAP server, you choose custom LDAP, and then you'll need to have, and you may need to get this through your IT department, what your LDAP settings are, so what the principal is, what the passwords, and some of the other configuration as necessary. You don't need to fill in all of these fields. just the basic URL, principal, and password at the top level. Okay, so when you assign security, it's a hierarchical the way the security is assigned. So if you set the application level security, that's inherited by everything underneath it. And that picture in the bottom left, that you'll see the hierarchy. So get the classes and then to any folders beneath that. So you get applications, classes, folders, forms, and down from there. If you are setting up security or code using the inheritance model of NXJ, the base form and child form and grandchild forms and so on that you've set up inheritance on also inherit the security settings. You only have to set it in one place. You should at least set, usually application level, but if not, then at least form level access. So that you may choose to leave all the other permissions open, find, insert, update, delete, and some of the commands, but at least set form access. So you make sure that they're authenticated before they get there. And again, there may be some cases where there's forms that they're generally consumable, but in general, you do want to secure them. And a best practice really is to have your entry form be a secured form so they get logged in initially. While I said that you could have some entry forms and then have them get authenticated later on, that's kind of an odd behavior for an application. Okay, so what happens when coding for security? What do you have to do to make this work besides the settings for the security provider as well as for your project properties and so on? And we'll just go through a quick overview of the coding, give an example of a login method, and then some other methods and properties that are available. So to use security with NXJ, the only real thing that you have to assign, you have to code, is the login button or statement. So when they press a login operation, what happens? So in the login form, again, we'll see the code in just a second here. You'll use a session.login method to authenticate the user against the provider of your choice. There's a command called challenge done that says they've been authenticated. And then on the not authorized form, you likely will use commands of previous form and logout to let them go back, or to log out and log back in as someone else. So the login form, we'll talk about for just a second and then see the code. The goal is to authenticate the user, and you do that using the session.login method, passing it the username and password. If that returns back true, you then do a Q command of challenge done. Now, the way the phrasing goes is when the login screen comes up, the NXJ application is challenging the user to authenticate themselves. Once they've accepted that challenge and press the OK button, and it returns back true from our session.login, then you Q command challenge done. And it makes sure that we have an authentication token so you can't trick it, or your users can't trick that. If session.login fails, you can choose what to do with them. Let them try again, or do a previous form, or let them do a logout. Your choice there. And if you do a logout, that takes them to the logout URL, which can either be a static HTML or JSP page, or it can be an NXJ form if you want to bring them back to another form. So this is the login command for that demo application there. And basically, most of it's just sanity checking. The password's not null and the username's not null. Do the session.login, and if that returns true, then Q command challenge done. So that then we'll take them on to whatever form they were trying to go to. So nothing else has to be done there. Otherwise, give them a message, or if they didn't fill in all the fields, ask them nicely to fill in all the information. And that's really all the coding you have to do once you set up the security settings and the hierarchy. Now, there are times when you want to get more information inside your application. This is just a sampling of some of the methods. These are the more popular ones. So certainly the username you can get. You can also check and see, is the user in a role? So one of the roles you've defined in NXJ. You can also do the same for a group in the security provider. Are they a member of that group? So you may choose to do this before, or you may choose your code path, or enabling and disabling fields. Then because we tie NXJ commands to your security in the security manager as well, you can see is that command allowed for a specific user or for a named user. For the user that's logged in. So you can say, can they do a find operation? Can they do a custom save operation? before you do a Q command or an execute of that command. So it takes us really to our last slide in this discussion. I've gone through this pretty quickly. And I'll pause for a moment here to say the deployment is really a two-step process. One is a one-time shot. Another one is each time you change your security, you need to update the security information in your database. So when you deploy your NXJ application to a remote server, and this really doesn't matter whether it's to JBoss, WebSphere, WebLogic, Oracle Application Server, whatever J2EE server of your choice, you need to create that data source named NXJDS, pointing to whatever database you wish to, Oracle, Sybase, Microsoft, SQL-based, your choice. But you do need to create the series of tables that NXJ needs for security. Now, the DDL, the statements, the SQL statements for those tables are in the NXJ release lib directory in the repository folder, and that little image on the right shows the SQL statements, and we have them for the most common databases, for Microsoft and Formix, SQL-based, and Oracle and DB2. So you run that in whatever that JNDI, the NXJ data source points to whatever database that points to. Now, once that's created, it's a one-time shot. Now, to push your security settings, the easiest way to do that is to go to the NXJ development environment and push those to that new database. If you don't want to connect to that from your development environment, feel free to extract the statements from the tables in your local NXJ data source and use them into your repository database on the new server. Now, once you have constructed your security, you test it, and you're happy with it, the way that you get the SQL statements, the insert statements or update statements for your application is to take the SQL file that's always created when you modify the security or do a make. In your project directory, at the top level of your project directory, there's a whatever your project name _security.sql. That contains all the statements to insert the information for your application into that security series of tables. So for example, over here we had a chart sample security file that we would simply go run through interactive or batch SQL to go ahead and put that into there. Okay, so at this point, with that description on security, again, so it's pretty easy to do. The main part is getting the infrastructure set up, and then it's point and click to set up your security.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. What we'll do now is we'll have the Q&A session. We'll go silent for about 30 seconds, minute at most, to start looking through the questions and also give you a chance to post any additional ones. And then we'll come back on and start going through them. And when we're done with that, we'll conclude the webinar. So hang on for just about 30 seconds to a minute. All right, well, we're back. We just have a few questions, but we'll go through them, and you know there's still time to post more if you want. So the first question, Kevin, this is probably more for you. do you have samples of login forms or not authorized forms for NXJ applications?
We don't have any download on our website, but certainly if you get a hold of us, I can send you either the project I use here for the demo, or we also have some smaller NXJ projects that we give to customers to get them bootstrapped on using security.
Great. Yeah, we can follow up with you on that afterwards. All right, next question. What level of granularity do you have for security past the form level that you're showing?
Right, so good question. This has come up some with our other work with modernization of other applications. So we secured at the form application, then form, and then down to the fields and the database operations. I think we have another question about showing how things were laid out in the IDE, and so we'll show that in just a second.
Great. Okay. Yeah, and so that does segue into the next question we have, which is, can you show us in the IDE the role assignment for that sample you showed at the beginning?
Exactly, and it's a good point to wrap this up or to reinforce that.
Yeah, well, I was going to bring up, I think it's good to reinforce the whole, when you showed that, there's very little coding
exactly
that's done to apply that security that you demoed. So
exactly, so it's a good point. So what I did, and literally in just a few minutes when I was working on this the other day, we have our start form. This is our beginning form for the application I used to demonstrate this. And you'll notice in the source, the only code are the statements for my buttons to do anything, just to display silly messages there. And so the form itself doesn't have any permissions on it. One thing to note on the menu is that the menu choices, all they do is execute a specific command called go to form and give it the form name. So for example, notice on the employee info form, that menu choice simply points to that form. There's no coding involved there. But if we then go to our security manager and look at how the security is laid up, you'll notice I have a series of roles. So my internal user points to the accounting employees, and so on, all the internal kind of users. And there's a customer role that only points to the customer group from my security provider. But if we drill down to the classes and go to all the forms, I tend to organize my forms with an authorized forms folder and then put the other ones at the top level. You'll notice that the start form has permissions for everybody. All the roles can get to it, but that only for these developer-defined commands, those three buttons, only the internal button can be executed by the internal group and sales by the sales group. So that's how we assigned, and those buttons became enabled and disabled automatically. And you'll notice also when I mentioned that the product form, when we were looking at that as a customer, that only the internal users can do add, deletes, and updates, whereas with the find, both internal users and the customer can do searches. So that, hopefully that covers the question of what the users were, what you're hoping to see. And so the basic point, though, is that it really is a point-and-click and inheritance model for security with literally no coding besides the login form.
Great. All right, well, that's all the questions we have, so we're going to wrap it up. If you do have a question, though, that you'd still like to post, go ahead and do it now. I'm sure we can catch it before we end everything. So first of all, Kevin and I want to thank you for attending the webinar today and participating. We hope you found it of value. There will be a recorded version available of this webinar probably the beginning of next week. And so, in fact, it's kind of funny. Usually we get a question is how do I get a copy of this presentation, and we didn't get that one today. But we're covering it here anyway. This webinar, the presentation and going into the product, it's all recorded. It'll be available under our website and under events, and you'll find it under archived webinars. In fact, you'll find archived webinars for the 3 products, well, actually 4 product lines that we do, and that's going to soon be 5 product lines. But you'll find them for all of them. We do a monthly series on several different products. NXJ is just one of them. And when you leave the webinar, you will get a survey questionnaire. It just takes a minute to fill it out. Please let us know how Kevin and I did, or more importantly, Kevin. He did all the heavy lifting in this one. And let us know if you liked it, what you liked, what you didn't, or I guess, you know, if there's things left unanswered for you. And then also let us know if there's specific topics you'd like to see covered in the upcoming webinars. The next one is going to be kind of mid-month next month. And which one is that, Kevin? Is it on the styling, or?
We've talked about that. That's likely what's going to be.
Okay. So we're going to do one on how to really make your applications pop, if you will. Now, everyone has their own definition of style, so we're not going to go so much into choosing colors or that kind of thing. But what are the types of tips and tricks that you can do with all the rich functionality in NXJ to, you know, once you decide what style works for you, really make that work for you in your applications. So stay tuned for that one. There'll be an invite out for that early next month. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close it. Again, thanks for participating and have a great day.
Thank you.